I'm going to be doing my presentation on Gandhi and the construction of India. The Transversal Law, which was passed in 1906, meant that unregistered people and prohibited immigrants could be deported without the right of appeal. This means that Britain could control who was able to be registered, so they could discriminate if they did not want that sort of people in India, such as troublemakers and This law led to the first of the non-violent mass movements that Gandhi led. The Aesthetic Law Amendment Act in 1907. This act was another like the Transversal Law, which meant that all male Asians were required to register and be fingerprinted. If you put that into the modern day, that could be sort of like the US border control, where you have to be fingerprinted as you enter the country and questioned. The male Asians were basically being treated like they were in a prison camp, as the males had to carry their registration cards with them at all times, otherwise might face deportation or imprisonment. This act was the last legal act before Gandhi took action against the laws the British government were passing. Gandhi's movements were actions that made the British government look bad by doing non-violent actions when the British soldiers retaliated with violence, such as the Amsterdam massacre in the 1920s. Non-cooperative movements in the 1920s was the signature of Gandhi, as we all know, that he led the Salt March and everything. This led to Swaraj, the self-government of India, so the Indian National Congress were able to rule their country, but not ultimately. Britain still had the say on like the laws and everything. But this led to the Indian people boycotting anything to do with government and refusing to pay taxes. So this meant that the British government were actually losing money due to India instead of gaining it. And the National Indian Congress at Calcutta agreed to this in 1920 in September, and by December it was put into practice across the whole of India. Gandhi as the president of the Indian National Congress. In the 1930s, Gandhi had told the people of India to keep refusing to pay taxes as a campaign of civil disobedience. When the armed revolts broke out, Gandhi had to confess failure of civil disobedience campaign. This was crucial in Gandhi's ideas for the non-violent revolution for India, since Congress had given Gandhi all political power for Swaraj. This means that Gandhi could directly question all the legislation that the British government were passing and try to persuade the politicians to make changes where they might need to help the Indian public. The Rowlatt Act gave the colonies emergency powers to deal with revolutionary activities. This means that Gandhi could claim the control over the Indian colony. In 1920, the Amsterdam massacre was caused by this act, and it was soon after this that it was shown on the world stage that to the other countries that Britain were being very brutal towards India. This massacre ultimately led to Gandhi being arrested in Britain for his response to this. Churchill was forced to release Gandhi, though, as the tensions in India were rising without their leader. The Amsterdam massacre. The arrest of the Indian national leaders led to a mob, and the mob went on a rampage which killed several Europeans, as well as leaving an English female missionary for dead. Brigadier General Reginald Dyer was sent to restore order, and he created a load of rules, such as no public meetings, and they would be disrupted with force if it came to that point. Dyer had marched a force of 90 Gurkhas and Indian soldiers into an enclosure and opened fire on a panicking crowd. Dyer basically made Indians kill their own people. He also made instructions that all Indians walking down the street where the woman missionary had been attacked were to crawl along it on their hands and knees. This ultimately made Indians look no better than the animals they were living upon, and especially in the British eyes, that British people were considerably higher above Indians. These actions were praised by Sir Michael O'Dyer, the governor of the Punjab. However, this was not this is not a common feeling throughout Britain. There was a lot of disapproval, especially in the House of Commons, as Churchill brought up this massacre, and that he was not happy with how Dyer handled the situation. There was a committee which was led by Lord Hunter, and Dyer tried to defend him and his actions for the massacre against this committee, but the evidence and conclusion were damning. Dyer was strongly censored and he was forced to resign from the Indian Army. Ultimately, these harsh actions Dyer put towards the Indian people led to the fall of the British rule over India, as it helped the Indians to back Gandhi's policy of non-violent resistance to British rule. Untouchability. This is when Gandhi demanded the eradication of untouchability after he had left the political aspect. Gandhi taught Hamisha, which was respect for all living things and avoidance of violence towards others. And this helped Gandhi realise that he needed to make India a better place socially. Untouchability is where through politics certain people would be above the law, so they could act a certain way and not have to worry about getting arrested. This, in a modern day equivalent, would be like members of Parliament passing laws which were to control the public, people like us, but then the members of Parliament not holding themselves to the same accountability, so that they were like a whole new tier above us, and that the laws that they passed for us did not apply to them, as they were higher up on the metaphorical food chain than us. Gandhi was crucial during all these important places and ideas and legislation, as Gandhi was able to construct political importance for India, especially during a time when they were being run by a foreign government which didn't understand their needs and which was nearly 5,000 miles away. And Gandhi was also the voice of the people when they were not being heard by the British government, when there was no Indian National Congress, there was no Swaraj, and it was just British rule, and that was it. There was no Indian say. Gandhi also offered an alternative approach to harsh rule, especially during the 1920s when British tactics were starting to become more harsh and even more public towards the world stage. Gandhi's approaches were understandable to the Indian public for many reasons, but the main one was that Gandhi understood the needs of the public, as he was living the same life they were. He was living in the same conditions, whereas the British politicians had no idea what it was like to live in India, which was nearly 5,000 miles away. And as Gandhi was able to question the legislation which was being passed to control India and make changes to the legislation to try and improve the needs for the people, that it was obvious that Gandhi was the leader India needed to get through this harsh time.
What?
Do you have that colourful suitcase what I borrowed from you from skiing?
Yes, why?
Because I need to get 2 things out of it.
Okay, give me a minute.